I'm hitting record. Greetings, everyone, and good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Stephen Neely. I'm your co-host for the virtual Dalcroze meetup. This is the 56th meetup that we've had in 3 years, and we're pretty psyched about it. We're pretty pleased with ourselves to have had this many times to meet with our friends, new and old. I want to introduce my dear friend, Veronica Bileski. Veronica, you want to say hi or?
Hello, nice to see you all, and thank you for being here. Um, I feel like I shepherded these two presenters today, and like I'm so happy that you both decided to share. So thank you. I'm excited to learn from you both.
I'm sure Veronica did shepherd them here. Veronica does
I'm like,
so
you
much.
have cool stuff to share. You should share it. So if anyone else listening to this recording is like, should I share? Like the answer is always yes. This is a community of really fabulous, intelligent people, and you do not have to have a piece of paper that says you are Dalcroze certified in order to share. So I just want to clarify that wherever you are in your work with Dalcroze, you are learning and connecting, and we really care about your insights and learnings and questions.
Absolutely. We so value everybody's work in this space. And people new and old to the community, we are always learning from you. So thank you so much for being here. Our tradition is to do a quick breakout room and let everybody meet a couple people, and then I'll call you right back. So I'm going to split just into 2 rooms tonight. And so whenever you get to your room, if you would just go around the circle and introduce yourself, tell everybody your name and where you're located, and who do you teach? Who do you teach or wish you taught? I'm going to call you back in 2.5 minutes. Ready, set, and go. All right, everyone. Well, hopefully you had a nice little breakout room and got a chance to meet some people. We've actually got 2 new people appeared while you were in the breakout rooms. So welcome to everyone. We wanted to, Veronica, do you want to announce the master classes or do you want me to?
Cynthia's masterclass is coming up next in April, and Cynthia is going to be talking about theme and variations in um, the Brahms Variations on a Theme by Haydn. And what is kind of cool is that Aneta just did a class on
Right.
theme and variations, and Cynthia is as well. And just like, sometimes my students are like, why do I have to learn about meter? I already know meter. I'm like, well, I went to a class as an adult about meter and I learned something new, even though I've been thinking about meter for a couple decades now. So I think it's just like a really lovely example of how every Dalcroze teacher is their own person in their own creative self and artist and is going to bring something new to the topic. And so we get to kind of keep thinking about and experiencing this topic from a totally different perspective.
If you haven't met Cynthia Lilly, you really need to go to her class. She works with all ages. She has a lot of years of working with the little ones in her resume, but she also does a lot of adult training. She's super smart and really fun and really nice. We strongly encourage everybody try to get in live on Cynthia's class that's coming up. 2 other things we wanted to quickly announce before we get into our work tonight is one is that we were just before we hit record, we were talking about the Congress in Geneva is this year. It's a once every 4-year conference at the Institute Jacques Dalcroze in Geneva, Switzerland. And if you've never gone, you should consider going. If you're interested in this material and this work, there's no better place to sort of get a real taste of the culture and just to meet a whole bunch of teachers and lots of interested students from around the world. It's deeply international.
Right. I have heard.
It's very historic. All sorts of cool traditions and great people, and so we really encourage everybody to support them. Veronica and I will be there and are looking forward to it. It only happens every 4 years. A second thing that is going on this same summer in August is the International Conference of Dalcroze Studies, and it will be hosted. I'm hosting it. It's going to be at my university, at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is a beautiful campus. Pittsburgh's a beautiful city, and the ICDS is a very exciting 4 days. We'll open on a Wednesday afternoon and close on a Saturday afternoon. And we're expecting something like maybe 200 people. We already have we already have people from 20 countries and 5 continents who we are confirmed who are coming. It will also be deeply international. There will be master classes and opportunities for you to participate in teaching. And there will also be what I think is really extra and exciting about the ICDS is there's chances for people similar actually to the VDM to just share what their research has been. What are the things that they have been working on? And so it can be all variety of things, from people who are doing work in history to people who are doing work in pedagogy, people who are overlapping fields with therapy or medicine or science or art or the design and the arts, all sorts of different versions of people who are overlapping with Dalcrozian ideas, but oftentimes in really wide fields. And the ICDS is the place where that is sort of most praised. So come to the ICDS and get some traditional teaching, and then get some way less traditional, blow your mind kinds of research as people share, and just come and meet the community. So I hope you'll come to Pittsburgh. Veronica, I'm gonna hand it back to you to introduce our good friends.
Okay. These are all fabulous people who have cool things to tell us. So we'll start with Cheryl, who is in Singapore, and then we'll go to Quanting, who is in South Dakota. And so if you could each try to stay to 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning, and you can go back to back. And after that, we'll have an open discussion about what you share. So Cheryl, the floor is yours.
Okay, hi everybody. You can hear me, right? Oops, what happened? Hi.
I think Cheryl's trying to share her screen. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I can't
okay.
find the Zoom. The Zoom disappeared, so I couldn't share my screen. Where are you? Okay, sorry about that. Just a minute. I'm so sorry about this. I'm not so familiar with.
No worries at all.
Just a minute, where are you? I don't know why, but your screen disappeared. That's why I'm trying to look for you. Share screen. Yep. No, it's not this one. This one. Share some. Hi everyone. Sorry again. Okay. Yeah. Just to introduce myself, I think I'll call myself a multidisciplinary artist, because that allows me the freedom to dabble in architecture, music, choreography, dance, and all kinds. So I think, okay, in the world of design anyway, there are a few design principles, and one of which I find quite universal is the idea of dominant, subdominant, and subordinate. So just to give you an idea, are you still able to see me, or you're looking at my screen?
We see your screen, but people can adjust. So if anybody wants to adjust, in the top right corner, there's a button called View, and you can choose side by side speaker to make you bigger,
Okay,
and you can adjust that sideways bar to see either you or the screen bigger.
Oh, so you can see me on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We can see you and
sorry about that.
And your screen.
Okay, because I'm a little bit panicking now. Okay, so just to give you an idea, so if you have an object, so dominant means that something in a, if you look at a good design has dominant and subdominant and subordinate aspects in it. So dominant means something that has the largest presence. So if you look at this Ghibli toy, dominant is essentially the white body, right? And then the subdominant is something that complements or contrasts and highlights the dominant itself. So this could be the branch. Then subordinate is something that gives it a touch of magic. So it could be a touch of color like this. So this idea of what I call D, S, D, and SO, dominant, subdominant, and subordinate, can be applied in many, many things. So this is just in terms of an object. So for example, just another example here. So if you see this box here, the dominant is the main brown body, right? Because that's the largest presence. And the subdominant is the part which complements it with a bit of texture and pattern because the main body is plain, right? And subordinate would be this little rim of gold here that kind of adds a sparkle, okay? So if you think in terms of a family, perhaps a traditional family, maybe the father is the largest presence, the mother is complementing the father, and then the child is what adds the interest, the point of interest. So when we move on to objects, this is just an exercise. I forgot to explain. So I teach at the School of Art, Design and Media in Singapore, and that is tertiary level. So we get students to explore abstract ideas using this theme or principles of dominant, subdominant, and subordinate. So if you look at this, you see that the dominant body is this long object, subdominant would be this, and then the student has carefully added this bright little streak here. So that is like the subordinate, and it gives it a point of interest, okay? So then if you apply it, I'm just giving you just rectilinear volumes. So here, again, dominant, the main red body. You can't quite see the texture, but there's striations here. And then subdominant is this furry piece here. And the subordinate is this little touch here, right, which is gold. So when you press it, it goes up and down. So there's something, a point of interest. Okay, so that's an object. So when I think about like this last one, I know I only have 5 minutes, goodness. So here we have another object. Let me just show you. So you can see the main body, subdominant, and there's this part here. So what adds the magic is when you add a bit of light. Yeah. Excuse me. So here, can you see? So now it lights up, and the light is the special element that adds surprise and magic to the design. So now to move back to something that we are more familiar with. So in music, for example, you can imagine the dominant as a kind of bass beat. So you could have a bass beat that sets the rhythm, right? And then, for example, you can, so that would be like a subdominant. And if I keep this going, and we could have a subordinate that adds just a minute, there's a lot of coordination for me here. So sorry, what? I think you can't hear. So, 2, 1.
So Cheryl, I'm not sure that we hear your music.
You can't hear it?
If you're playing music, I
Yeah.
can't hear it.
You can't?
I cannot.
Okay, that might, it's all right. So I'm just saying that there is, but you can hear my voice, right?
Yes.
Can you hear this when I'm not? Can you hear this?
No.
No? Oh, okay, never mind, it's all right. So my point is that sometimes I'm supposed to share about architecture and space. So I liken that, you know, in a piece of music, you have sounds and then you have silences. So when it's sounds and silence, then you can choreograph that. So if we relate it to space, you have physical objects and voids and space. So in terms of relating to dominant, subdominant, and subordinate, the dominant sets the base beat. The subdominant is an additional in between rhythm. And then the subordinate is like something special that appears after a longer time lapse. So like a bell, like, can you hear my bell?
Mm-mm.
No, I
No?
think there's a setting, which I'm not sure you need today, but there's a setting called original sound in your audio
Okay, it's okay.
settings. And if
It's
that's
okay.
not
So I'll
set,
just
One
so I'll
minute,
just share
Cheryl.
this with you.
yeah,
Pardon?
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
minute, please.
Yeah, so now just look at the screen I share. Yeah, so here, this is from a project and an assignment with my university students, where we break out in small groups, and each group is given a set of instruments, right? And then they create their own sound patterns using these three instruments, but thinking about the idea of dominant, subdominant, and subordinate. So here are some of the patterns that they have come up with, pattern A and pattern B. So say if you have three instruments, I get them to decide which one is the dominant, making the dominant sound or beat, and then which one makes the subdominant, and then which one makes the subordinate. Then they switch it around and they create two short rhythmic cycles. So that's pattern A, and this is pattern B. Yeah, so then from there, what they do is they try and apply material, texture, and tactile quality to the sounds that they have created, right? This is where the object making comes in. So if you can see here, just look at me now, don't look at my screen. So let me stop sharing first. Yep. So this is typically something, a sculpture that could come out from their musical explorations. So you will see like something more grounded in a space. So that could possibly be the tapping sound of the claves, tuck, 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 tuck. And this could be the chimes, dong, 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 something like that. So that becomes visual. And then the quality of the sound itself is kind of textural, like clouds, because it expands out into the space and fills up an entire volume. So they try and indicate that visually with spreading out of the clouds, you know, climbing up into the space, whereas sounds that are more grounded would stay on the lower level. And then there's these little scratchy bits here, which could be like zigzag blocks that go scratch, 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 so they crawl around the floor. So basically, every group would come up with their own sculptural interpretation. So here you can see a spiral, and then it climbs up because it increases in volume, dong, 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 something like that. And then there's the swirl of wire mesh because it's something that has a longer sound sustaining through a longer time span. So it goes shoo or something like that. It climbs up. And then these beats here go tock, tock, tock. So yeah, so this is how they visually translate from something that's audio into something that's visual and sculptural. And then the next step is, let me just show you our last one. This is one of the coolest ones I love. I really love this. You have to see it this way. There's like a mirror and there's a swirl, yeah, like a whirlpool. So this is like a expanding kind of ripple sound, wong, like that. And it's actually created by, I think you're familiar with this. I'm not sure if you can hear this. The thunder tube. So it spreads out. Yeah, so that is like a ripple. And it's kind of all encompassing. And we have the chime-like sounds with a hint of gold at the bottom. Yeah. So from here, these are their audio mood box studies. And then when my assignment itself is called Ma. So yeah. So this is interesting because when you study using Audacity, the wave patterns made by your instruments, you get to see how it's distributed in time in a linear fashion. And then that gives them a hint on how to also distribute the materials that they intend to use in the space. So after they've created their mood boxes, next is to, Ma is about, as Stefan was saying, void and gap and recess. So what I tell them to do is, it's a city of Ma, where in the city you have to come up with a hub, a habitat, as well as a highway. And this is created, the mood of your own city is created by the very first sound composition that the group made together. And then they have to go around school grounds to find a forgotten gap, because Ma means gap or slit or space, where their city will be slotted in. So yeah, so these are some studies. So it's interesting. So for this particular group, they thought about the highway, how it moves and stretches and grows, and how it can inhabit a forgotten space. So ultimately, let me try and shift you. Yeah, so these are all the studies here.
Cheryl, is it okay if we just pause here and hear Quanting, and then we can kind of
yes,
go into
sure.
a little more details? Unless you have one more thing to share.
Yeah, just this one more thing here. So this is their city. So you can see it's like a creeper vine climbing up some drainage pipe in school. Yeah. And then there's the space and the people and how it moves. So that's how it works. It's just a rough idea of where this assignment could go. I'm so sorry to
No, this is really cool. Would you please put those links in the chat so that we have them and that people can kind of look more deeply on their own? Because I definitely want to.
Okay, sure. We can. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Quanting, she can talk first. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Quanting,
I'll stop
we'll
sharing
hear from
first.
you, and then we'll have a discussion about both of these.
Right.
Thank you for sharing, Cheryl. I just thought about how it can be a disciplinary project for music and art, and perhaps PE, because talk about space and stuff. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Quanting Cheng. I'm originally from Taiwan, so Quanting in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. I speak Mandarin Chinese, my native language, and it means beautiful champion. That's my grandma want me to be a beautiful champion, so that's my name. My name Quanting means beautiful champion, and I'm currently in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I moved here about 2 years ago, and I'm currently teaching K through 5, and this is my 5th year teaching in elementary school. So yeah, and this past year I actually is fairly new to Dark Rose. I started the CME workshop last year. I guess after pandemic, I've been searching for something. Like, I'm just wondering, like, I taught in the IB school, and they are heavy on reflection. It's like heavy writing. And then during pandemic, we transferred to like online. So like I try to incorporate a lot of technology. And now we're finally back into in person. And now I'm teaching public school. So I just started to wonder, so what is special about in person? And in public school, there are so many kids there. Maybe after the remote learning, like what's the value of in person and then in person learning? And then what is the value of like my music class, like in classroom setting, like emotional and the social value is what I started to like value more. And so after I did the workshop, I'm like, oh, this is great, because that's kind of like I want to teach something, and Dark Rose kind of provide me some ways to kind of do it, connect your mind and body, like hopefully eventually connect it with the spirit. But so all my kids are not movement trained, and then they have been at home for at least like 1 year or so. So I mean, in the beginning, I think it's quite challenging, and then I got a lot of help from like some of people like Dr. Neely and then Anthony here. It's great help for me. So I mean, couple things I tried, like because my kids couldn't move as good as like adults, and then they can move like freely. So the first thing I started to think about is that, oh, okay, is there any way I can just have them move one step? So I started to come up with the idea. So I did so just copy me. So I did kind of like this motion and this motion, and they copy me. And then like some of the class, when I did it, I say legato, staccato. And then they just copy me. And then after that, I started to play with the sound, and I did it on the piano. I said, so show me what you hear. And then so I can play the legato sound and only one or two. And they started with that. And they can do in any direction, but then usually, because they are not trained to like walk in the space yet, I usually have them reset back to like their dark spot. Because I mean, I know like when I observed Anthony's class, it was magical. They just go into place, everybody's so peaceful, and then the class just runs smoothly. And I was still heavily relying on my dots, because I want to make sure I have my safe net. If anything falls, I want to make sure they can still go back to the dots. Yeah, so I think like I tried one sound, so like start with like smaller chunks, and then I think the legato and staccato is quite effective, because with my older kids, they feel like when I ask them, I try other things too, but then when I ask them to move, they're like, why are we doing this? This is PE class. But then if I try to like present it as I'm going to teach you legato and staccato, it's kind of like they buy it a little bit more. Like, okay, we're learning something specific, and then it's like you see that right away. So that's one thing. And then my second thing is that I try to incorporate American Sign Language. So for example, I did a concert, and then there is one song, like South Dakota is the land for Native Americans, is Dakotas. That's why we are called South Dakotas. So I mean, I choose Amazing Grace, and it happens to be the last line is the repeated line. And I think I kind of incorporated Dark Rose idea. So the last line, it goes Waka Tanka, that means the great Lord in their belief. So I just kind of do the W, K, T, K. I mean, I have a video of the entire school ended up singing that with my 5th grade concert, and everybody is just very touched. But I think for me, it's an easier way to access that, because I'm teaching the movement, but I also make sure that they are holding the length of the note for Amazing Grace. But then they are just showing me the beginning of each word, kind of like a reminder. Cool. And the other thing I found interesting is the Body Fish by Gregory Risto. I mean, because I was teaching the hand sign, and I'm fluent with it, but it just, I don't know, it's hard for the kids to tell, even though it has meanings. But then I feel it's just like the whole body movement, especially I just keep asking them in the C skills, which one is the Listet? I know like we should try to have them like build up their own, but then I think the starting point, that is just easier for the kids to have something to grasp on. So yeah, I think that's about what I want to present. Oh, and then sometimes I try to do folk dance. So I was hoping that for my older grades, every quarter I at least do 1 or 2 folk dance, so they can get used to this idea of understanding music through movement. It might not be ideal because it's kind of preset, but at least there's something they can like, oh, okay, yeah, it can be music, because I believe in our curriculum, folk dance is something you have to do in 2nd grade and 1st grade. Yeah. And yeah, I would like, the other thing is the resources. Anthony is here. I think she can definitely speak for him, because his post has been a great resources for me. Like every Monday, I just get the post and I try to teach it. Monday, get the post, try to teach it. I mean, it's not the best, but then you just go back and watch a video and then just develop my lesson from there, which is great. And then, yeah, Gregory Risto, like his Body Fish has been useful. And then I learned from his like interrupted canon. That was quite nice. Yeah. Cool. I think I used up all my time.
Thank
And
you
person
so
will ask
much.
more questions than things I want to say. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Quanting and Cheryl. So many amazing ideas that you shared. I'm just trying to remember them all. So while I do that, if anyone has comments or questions, please.
I'll start off and just say I think maybe from the descriptions, if all we had was the descriptions on our little agenda as to what these two presentations were to be about, we might struggle a minute to find the connections between them. But hearing you both present, I mean, there's so many, so much of the Dalcrozian sort of mindset, or sort of the philosophy of way of doing it, is that these things exist in multiple and they inhabit multiple spaces, the same concepts. And so the idea that we experience music not just as sound outside of me, but somehow inside of me, and that if I use motion, that I might somehow know something about the sound, as just one pairing. So this idea that there could be like a kinesthetic thing that is also an aural thing. So Quanting's examples of just how, just trying to get them to like participate in some way is revealing something more about the music, I think is it may be identical to what Cheryl is doing with her students, which is to say, yeah, I mean, there's this idea of space, or maybe of the void, or of the space between. And now what would it mean to sort of inhabit that? And so let's look for an aural way, let's look for a sculptural way, let's look for a visual thing, and so trying to piece these together are all ways of sort of building up an actual rich or deep understanding. So what did anybody hear? What did you grab a hold of? Jenny? And great to see you.
Yeah. When Cheryl was talking about making the sculptures, it got me thinking about art plastique, and I haven't taken any of those classes, but it just seemed like instead of the body making the sculpture, you're actually creating something. And so I thought that would be a really beautiful addition to any Dalcroze class.
Absolutely. When Adriana Alsch, who almost made it to this meeting tonight, she does a whole series of things that are pretty much exactly that are sort of a combination between built form and then how it translates to different versions of plastique animé. Good. Another? Chris?
Cheryl, your work made me think about Del Start and our obsession with the Trinity. I think it's so important when I'm working in groups of 3 with students that I help them understand that the 3 are always in dialogue. And so I thought it was nice that you presented this idea of dominant, subdominant, and subordinate. I think the words themselves suggest a hierarchy, but then when you discussed it, it was clearly that they are in relationship and not really a hierarchy. Do you have a thought about that?
Indeed, you're right. It's about hierarchy. I kind of break it down into 3 elements first for them to, simplify things, for them to understand, because the real world is essentially not made out of just 3 objects. It's sometimes 4 or 5 elements. So when we do our initial exercises, it's just to make them focus on just 3 objects first, and subsequently they can start adding maybe a second subdominant, or maybe another subordinate, which is the smaller object. But the dominant, they have to understand there's only one of it, because when there's too many of it, it is just overpowering. So this idea of relativity and comparison is important. So I think that ties in a lot with music as well, where if you add too many accents, it just becomes very crowded and chaotic. But when you have just one accent after every 4 beats, it stays special. So this idea of amount and the void, the space that they give in between, for them to let that material or that element breathe, is important. So I find that because I teach both kind of music to early childhood education, and then I try to bring that into the tertiary level of teaching as well, because I feel that this whole notion of music making together, I think Quanting was touching on class management, right? So when you have a whole, because you must understand it's a design art school, so you have all these angsty young adults, and they are like, wanting to show off their ideas. So to get them to come together as one body, this playing and creating music together makes them listen to each other, and then calibrate from there, like who is going to take the lead, who is coming in between, who is going to add that special touch. So automatically, the hierarchy, they kind of decided while creating the music together, and then they learn to pace each other, follow each other's tempo, and there's a lot of like ice breaking as well during the process. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be 3. It can be more. It's just the very baseline for starting a design. So when I talked about, when we translated it to the cities, there I just broke it down to 3: hub, habitat, and highway. But of course, they could have multiple highways, multiple hubs, and habitats. It's just how they distribute the proportioning.
Yeah.
Yes, Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer
I
had-
was wondering, Cheryl, if your students are actually working with instruments or are they working in sound design programs?
Well, the students who attend the school, they could venture into gaming industry, filmmaking, or just visual communication, so like advertising or things like that.
Yeah.
So they can branch off into many fields.
When they were making when they were making the little recordings that you shared, were they playing live instruments in the room?
Yes.
Yeah.
They were. And it's really interesting because I mean, I get them to think. So like I said, they have to switch which instrument becomes the lead and which is the accent, or which is the rhythm. So when they do that, they have to switch their thinking, and then they have to take turns, like, so that really worked out very, very well. I mean, it started off as an experimentation because I wanted to bridge the different things that I teach into the design field. So yeah. Then it worked out really well. And I also like the idea of how when they go around hunting in school for that gap, that space, that forgotten, corner, it's making them open their eyes and see things that they might have not looked at. So yeah, so it has been interesting. For example, like electric sockets that are like tucked away somewhere below the eye level, they actually inserted their entire city in there. Or even the electrical risers and piping in school, they put their city in there. So the result of this musical exploration just kind of blossom into something that initially I might not have imagined it, but it just grew together as one class. Yeah, so that was fun.
Very nice.
And I think it also embodies a lot of Dalcrozian philosophy, because the space, the time, the energy when they create the piece together expands out into a literal, like a city forming as well. Yeah, so those concepts are quite universal, I feel.
I think so too. Veronica?
Cheryl, it's really beautiful. And I love the idea of people listening better to each other because they come in with so many of their own amazing ideas. Quentin, I just wanted to tell you that my students, when I was teaching in a school, would go crazy in my class because I let them move. And the only thing they associated with movement was running in PE. And it took me a while to realize that I have to teach them that in between crazy running and sitting still at a desk, there is another option, but I have to make it clear that the rules are different. So like I literally had some 6 and 7-year-old boys who I like held them to stop them from running, and I said, this is not PE class. This is music class. It has different rules. We'll move, but listen to my rules, right? Like, because I think we have to realize that when kids walk into a space that is free of desks and chairs, they like might not know what to do there, and they might be terrified, and so then they just start doing whatever is familiar, and so I'm like, really delighted by the activities you're finding that are small and perfect beginnings for your kids, right? Because I think I have so many thoughts in my head of things I've done before, things that have worked, but you're really discovering and exploring like what is that like one little baby step that they need to take to get started in this. And so I was curious if you are keeping a list of them or if you're like kind of like developing them or improving them as you go, because these germs of ideas I think are really fabulous.
I'm trying to keep a journal because I still need to write down sometimes word by word what to say.
Yes.
Like because I just couldn't, I don't have the flow in my head yet, and then the class will get more comfortable, but I still, and when I do it multiple classes, I think that's the way I have to go. The book of what works. Yeah, that's what like Dr. Moore would say. Yeah, but I agree with you for the kids. Sometimes they think it's recess. Just have to remind them it's not PE, it's not recess, and it's smaller in the gym, so you can really like run. But my school counselor did mention about, usually when like the specialties like PE, art, library, and music, when like music is the one usually gets to call for the support because of the space probably. There's no like restriction for them. Almost, but yeah, but I think Anthony probably have a lot more insight about this.
Well, yeah, it's great, Quanting. First of all, I think you're right on when you said about your intuition that this work was so appropriate coming out of like all this virtual learning and all of this sort of to be connected back to the bodies and the social aspect of it. I think you nailed it. I think your intuition was right on, because that's my intuition as well. And what I love about this work for the public school setting in particular is these children, it feels like they're dissociated from their body for most of the day. Like I just can tell that they just don't have that, the way that they move, they're craving that connection. And that ties into what Veronica was saying about the difference between the type of movement that we're doing and the type of movement they're accustomed to doing. And so one of the things that I've gotten into the habit of this year is, and Quanting, when you were visiting me, I wonder if you noticed this, but when we were taking our shoes off, I ask the children, I say, why do we take our shoes off? And the response that I've trained them to say is because it helps us move the right way. And they all chant that. So, and that like ingrained in their head that this is different. We're part of the reason we take our shoes off is to engender the right kind of movement. And it just changes the culture altogether. So anyway, I have lots of thoughts about it, but I'm so glad to hear what you're doing, Quanting, and I'm so happy about it.
It's very good.
I got a big pushback for that for my 5th grader. I tried that and it's like, no, what are you talking about? Anyway.
You'll find your way. And
we should have a whole meetup about how you respond to teenagers who don't want to take off their shoes. I think we should like get everyone together, get all their best tips, because that's the thing. Yeah. I think Jenny and Chris had something to say. Jenny, do you want to go first?
Sure. I was just wondering, Quanting, if your students, are they working with instruments or is it mostly singing? Does it depend on the ages you have?
I mean, nowadays I try to I model Anthony's lesson. Like I do the Eurythmic a little bit and then do some singing. And then if the curriculum calls for me to do recorders or drums, I will do it. But maybe it's like smaller portion. But I mean, I'm sure that if that's even if it's like an all-based class, I would be able to sneak in some of the Dalcroze way into it. Yeah. Like, for example, the drumming, like Anthony's post had so many different, how to start them on the drumming and drum so carefully, mindfully, and then also you have to drum it musically. I'm talking about two dots.
Very good. Chris, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Quanting if you brought the horn into class yet.
Quanting plays the French horn. Very
So I'm a trumpet player and Quanting's a horn player. And I think I was really hesitant to bring it in to the Dalcroze setting because of the piano tradition. I'm not sure why I was so scared of it, but I've gotten better at using it in class, maybe even just for a few minutes. but I'll act like I'm curious. You know, I was playing earlier today. You know, this is my trumpet. I love to play the trumpet. How would you move to this? And you'd be amazed at not only how much different kinds of quality of sound I can get out of the instrument, but how sensitive they are to it. Actually, I think they're more sensitive than on the piano. And I'm not sure why that is. It might be the human quality of the air, but like, yeah, I could teach staccato or legato on the piano, but it's going to be way more nuanced with an instrument like trumpet. So I would just really encourage you, even if it's just for 60 seconds, find out how sensitive they might be. And worst case, they'll just be like really interested about a new object in the room.
That's so good. The VDM has, we've brought up different versions of this multiple times over the, oh wait, it looks like I'm lagging. Can you all hear me? We've brought up this idea of when can we get other instruments and how can we get other instruments into the room. Veronica and I have talked about it at length, and we're all for it. So I would love to hear more stories of people bringing in their, their non-piano instruments into the classrooms and trying to find all the different ways that they're useful. I love that story, Chris. Thank you for that. I was thinking about, oh, go ahead, Veronica.
Oh, okay. Well, I will just quickly say that Emma Shubin and I have also talked a lot about how we're both trained flutists, but our Dalcroze training is mostly piano improv. And what does it mean when we bring our flutes into the classroom? And Emma has told me that when she brings the flute out, the 3 and the 4-year-olds just are drawn to it. And her theory is that because she loves the flute and they can tell that she loves it with like a special kind of lifelong, this is my instrument and this is how I express myself and this is my main instrument. And I've just been thinking about that a lot because I can play way better staccato and legato or any, like my nuance on my main instrument is better. But sure, I will also say wind instruments are better at legato than pianists.
I love it. I was thinking, so both Cheryl's notion, she was talking about those voids, that the students were sent out to go looking for, and the idea, I don't know who we attribute these words to, but the space between, so it's not the notes that we're interested in as much as the space between the notes that we're quite interested in very often in a Dalcroze kind of mindset. And just thinking of all the different ways that we draw our students' attention to that. So the idea of a scavenger hunt or a field trip going around and looking for spaces between is just lovely, just as from a music teacher perspective, let alone from a designer's perspective. And then Anthony talking about that the students aren't even in their bodies. One of the things that the last couple of years have been really excited, always I don't know, I've gotten very geeky about teaching when I have opportunity, and usually I'm teaching university students, these super slow motions. Like what would it, we'll play I'll play a bit of music at the piano and ask everybody to find a beat, and everybody finds the beat that's closest to their sort of standard gait. So everybody, I think by default, looks for a beat that is most like normal you. And so you're just like, I don't know, I just kind of normally move like this and I found that, so I'll move it. And then we'll play with different beat levels, sometimes going faster, and so we can get into a scurry and then going slower and maybe another tier or 2 slower, where we end up in these super drawn out, expansive, really takes a fair bit of body control, a bit of technique to not trip over yourself the whole time. But when you can actually get in the groove of some of those big spaces, to me, I don't know, it's just been really rewarding. And it makes me think about the space between and those voids and having a way to inhabit that kind of space. Like, what does that mean? So I think my university students are every bit as much disembodied or out of their bodies as any of the younger groups that have been mentioned today. And one of the things that our work, has such great opportunity for is to try to get you to remember that you have a body and that it feels, and that it doesn't only feel in the most normal, comfortable, rehearsed way, but that actually it has quite a range. And so as we expand into that range, then there's opportunity for new understanding. I just love those ideas. We've got maybe 5 minutes even if we run 2 minutes over because we started 2 minutes late. So anybody have another thought or idea about any of the things that'll come up today? Hi, Rosalie, and welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been so great participating and hearing all of these ideas. And I just want, so first of all, thank you to the presenters and thank you to everybody who's shared so far. And kind of a segue about the space between the notes. I keep thinking about what the first presenter I shared about the objects and the dominant, the subdominant, and the subordinate. And I keep thinking about the space between lessons for students. I think we probably sometimes have all referred to when we're talking about expressive music, we can relate a composer to maybe the architecture of that time period. And sometimes that can be beneficial. Sometimes it can maybe go over a student's head, but I love the simplicity of just taking any object. It could be, these glasses, or it could be just a small object that has 3 parts that they can relate to. And I keep thinking about, what we're really wanting for our students to do there are a lot of things we want our students to do, but one is to literally make music. So even if they're studying a Bach piece and they're doing the exact notes on the page and following the dynamics, we want them to express their own music. And I can just see students looking around and seeing maybe a cube out there, at a shopping store or wherever, and looking at that object and seeing those 3 aspects that were designed and experiencing music in an object in their own way outside of the lesson, and then becoming more fascinated with that and then bringing it in. So in a way, it's not practicing, but it's experiencing music at a much deeper level that can then help them to be more expressive on their own. So I find it really exciting to be able to use that, with my students, because music is all around you visually as well. And you really brought that home, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to add, when you're talking about different instruments, so obviously in the university studio, and it's for art anyway, visual arts, so we don't have instruments. So the tertiary students, they do behave rather like your 5-year-olds when I brought in these instruments, because when they explore, like the resonating bars, they have long sounds, so you need to give them space to breathe before striking again. But the university students, when they first discover this, they go pong 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 pong, and it's just so deafening. So I have to say, listen to your instrument, all right, and let it tell you how much breathing space it needs. And then they're like, oh, because you have like claves that give you short sounds and instruments that give you long sounds. And that's when that whole different level of listening sets in for them, when they realize that, oh, I can't keep striking this because then it just drowns out. And then they start thinking, oh, how can I make this more present or less present? How can I make it that magical touch thing like that? So I think that ties in, and I find it really sometimes disorienting when I switch between teaching young children and the tertiary level student, because they sometimes overlap, and I find that the university students really behave like young children, and the younger kids are very much more mature than we give them credit for. So so it's really funny. Then and I agree, this whole idea of dominant, subdominant, and subordinate is just an eye-opener for them. So when I first introduced them to ordinary objects and identifying the D, SD, and SOs in them, then I send them out and say, look around you in your environment, look at buildings, look at objects, look at spaces, and then take a picture, and kind of like comment what you feel is DSDSO, and someone else might feel differently. And then we have this platform where they post these pictures and they discuss, and kind of opens up for discussion. So I really like the idea that Rosie spoke of just now about linking with a piece of music, or maybe even imagining how an object could sound like a piece of music, something heavy, solemn, long, or something light and airy-fairy. Yeah, that really works well.
So good. Well, friends, I think we did it. I think we've made it through a 56th meetup with some great friends and some really interesting ideas. I hope that everybody encourages everybody else to come and listen, because I think this was great. There's so many ideas useful for, I think, people teaching at any level. I'm just proud to be associated with you all. Thank you, Veronica, for helping us keep this all going. Thank you to our presenters, to Quan Ting and to Cheryl. Really great ideas. And congratulations on what just seemed like a whole bunch of really great work. And thanks to everybody else for being here. We have a masterclass coming up. Veronica, can you just remind us one more time when that is?
Yeah, the masterclass is on April 22nd or 23rd, depending on where you live in the world. And then we have one more meetup before then in about 2 weeks. So we will see you
Excellent.
then. Oh, and it's the Italians are putting together something in tribute to their teacher, Luisa Di Seni. And so it'll
Excellent.
be,
A
we'll learn about,
future. Yeah.
we'll learn about her.
So good. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great couple weeks, and we'll see you back at meetup number 56.
57.
57.